Hey guys, it's Rich Rebuilds here, aka Uncle Rich, aka Where's the Free Food At? And I wanted to tell you about my first winter in the Model S. And I'm sure you've seen 100 videos of, hey, this is how my Tesla does in the winter, yay! Well, this is my first winter in my Model S, and I never watched any of those videos, nor do I have any prior knowledge to driving an EV in winter. So I'm gonna give you my experience. First of all, I treat this thing like a rented mule. I leave my charge cable wherever it lands after I throw it. And because I'm too cheap to install a 220 volt outlet, I charge at 110 volts and the charge rate is 3 miles an hour. So therefore, it would take me 3.5 days for a full charge. So what I try to do is I try to make sure that every night when I get home, the car is plugged in. Unfortunately, sometimes my wife forgets to plug it in. And instead of getting a whopping 36 miles back overnight, we get about 20, which is then quickly eaten up by simply driving a couple miles in the wintertime. So that forced me to go to the mall to charge the car, assuming there's an open spot in EV parking, because usually there's some guy in a Volt.
Hey, figures it's the Volt guy ruining everything. I can't use this adapter, so I'm gonna sit here like a dummy, I guess, until he gets back.
1 hour later.
Ooh, I had to wait him out. 15 miles, 16 miles an hour, baby. Ooh!
Well, it's literally always a Volt owner. I never see Leaf owners at public charging, probably because they don't have enough range to even make it to a mall. I also parked the car outside in freezing rain to test the strength of the door handles to see what they can break through. Oh, that's not bad at all. It's kind of cool, actually. Now, the first portion of this video will be my complaints, realizing I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and the second half will be meeting up with a professional to talk through those concerns and eventually getting a resolution. So here is what an inexperienced EV owner has for issues. The first thing I noticed when driving my Tesla in the winter and freezing cold is that on really cold days, the tire pressure light comes on, which most cars do. Oh, no problem. Let me just find out which tire it is.
All right, some cold weather performance stuff with the Model S. I have my first error message, and it is tire pressure too low. Okay, check tire pressures. All right, let's see how easy this is in the Model S. That one looks fine. That one looks fine. Nothing obvious here. That looks fine. Nothing obvious. That looks fine, nothing obvious. Okay, what I don't understand is this. Let's get a good rant going here. I have to check the individual pressures in each individual wheel before I figure out which one it is. What year is this that I can't tell which one of my tires has low pressure?
The second thing I notice on really cold days also is the regenerative braking is limited. So the car no longer slows itself down when coming to a stop. You need to be careful. You also need to be careful if you do have regenerative braking and you let your foot off the accelerator and are driving over ice. I've done it a couple times, and needless to say, I've definitely puckered up.
Would you look at that? No regen. It's too damn cold outside. It's 21 degrees and it's too cold for regen. And my tire pressure's low, and I can't check that because this model year Tesla doesn't tell you what tire it is.
Next thing I notice is a range loss. Let's just say it's below freezing out and you start off with 200 miles of range. If you drive 50 miles, you figure, okay, I have 150 miles left. Well, actually in the cold, that could amount to over 100 miles of range. Yes, I'm serious. Supposedly you get that range back when the car gets warmer, but sometimes you don't, depending on driving style. You have to factor in other losses as well, including incline, wind direction, cabin heat, and aerodynamics, like if you have snow on your car or something. Also cold tires as well. It's very hard to get the rated range in this car anyways, unless you drive like this person. You know what? I need some help. Let me talk to the pros to help me figure this out.
All right, so I'm here with my friend Chris, and Chris has a lot of experience with Teslas in general. I'm here to ask him a few questions as to how to survive the winter in the Tesla Model S. Chris, I've been having a lot of issues with my Tesla in the wintertime. One of the major things I've been having is that when I go out and I try to get in the car and I start it and then I go driving around, I'm getting into the thousands for watt hours per mile. So what can I do to get that down? What can I do to kind of make my winter driving experience a little bit better?
The most obvious thing first you want to do is make sure that the car is plugged into wall power. Preheat the cabin. You want to do that probably for about 15 to 20 minutes.
All right.
That way that gets electrons moving in the battery. It's a high voltage draw on the battery because the Ptc heater pulls about 400 volts.
Okay.
Once that happens, that's going to warm the battery up, bring it up to operating temperature. It's just like a regular ice car when, you know, it's not happy when it's super cold either. And you're going to use more gasoline in that instance. You're going to use more electrons. to get the car up to temperature. So once you've preheated the car, the other thing you want to do is make sure you're using the seat heaters, because that's actually the most efficient way to heat your body. Right. Instead of trying to heat up the whole cabin to 70-something degrees, it's much easier to just heat your body up instead, and it uses significantly less power because it's only low voltage, not high voltage.
I see. So here's my problem, is that I'm a cheap bastard, and I am using 120 volt to plug this car in and to charge this car.
Right.
Now, can you survive the winter charging using 120 volts in one of these cars?
So the issue with that, the short answer is no, it's not a good way to do it. So basically the problem is there's an auxiliary battery heater that heats up the coolant.
Okay.
Similar to like a block heater on a nice car would be. And so if you're plugged into a 110 outlet, you're actually using more energy than is physically coming back into the car. Okay. So you're actually going to be having a net negative amount of charge as you're doing this.
So you're saying that if I charge my car to, let's just say, whatever, 200 miles of range, and I plug the 120 volt outlet in, I turn the heater on for, let's just say, 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour or so, I could come out to my car and I could have less than 200 miles of range.
Right. Yep. And even more importantly than that, if you were to say park it outside, or, you know, if your garage isn't very warm, and you've only got it plugged into 110 and say it's less than 30 degrees out, that's not an exact number, but roughly there, the battery coolant heater is going to be running that whole entire time, and it's going to be taking more than the roughly 4 miles an hour that you're going to be pulling in for electricity.
I see.
Even if you, say went on vacation for 2 weeks and left your car outside plugged into a 110, battery will still be dead when you get back, because it's still trying to keep itself warm that entire time.
Okay.
And it's not getting enough electricity in to compensate for the fact that you're consuming energy. You're consuming energy when you're not going anywhere.
Gotcha.
So if you're gone for any period of time, a few days, you come back, you're going to notice that you have, significantly less range than what you started with.
Okay.
So it's not a long-term solution. You're still going to have to use either public charging or a supercharger or something like that to use it reliably.
You mentioned the PTC heater and also the battery heater. What's the difference? Does one take over for another one, or like how does that whole thing work?
PTC heater is basically what heats up the cabin in the car. Okay. And that's basically a giant toaster oven element, and it just blows air through it, and that's what heats up the air inside the car. Okay. The other coolant heater for the battery solely heats the coolant that goes through the battery and through the drive unit. Okay. So they're two completely unrelated systems, and they're not interconnected, so one doesn't feed off the other, they don't help each other out. Whereas with like a traditional ICE car, coolant goes through the engine, gets warmed up there, it then goes through a heater core and heats up the interior of the car. The battery and the drive unit don't generate that kind of heat. So it's not a viable use for heating up the interior. So they had to come up with another option, and that's the PTC heater. I see. Is there anything else that you could think of that would help me out in the wintertime besides preheating the car? Do you think 15 minutes to 20 minutes is enough? Should it be longer than that? I would say at a minimum you'd want to do that. Okay. If you're willing to do up to a half an hour beforehand, that makes a huge difference. Okay. Because you easily could burn through 30 miles of range in that first 10 or 15 minutes. Really? If you start from stone cold and it's 15 to 20 degrees outside, or even in upwards of like freezing level. Another huge one is tire pressure. If the tires, air naturally compresses or condenses when it gets cold. Right. So the outer circumference of the tire gets smaller, and you're going to be spinning the tires faster, which uses more range as well. Now, what's the recommended tire pressure for a Model S? I heard it's higher than a standard car, right? Yeah, so it depends. If you've got 19-inch tires, it's 45 PSI. If you have 21-inch tires, it's 42 PSI. Okay. But then also the Performance Plus cars, it's kind of a little bit different, where I think it's 38 in the back and 42 in the front. Ah, okay. So, but you can check the door jamb on the car, and it'll tell you specifically what your car is supposed to have. Okay, awesome. What we talked about before as far as preheating the car, it's important to have the defrost put on and melt as much of that snow off the windshield and the ice as you possibly can. The wiper transmission is actually like a relatively weak component. All the time we'd see people that had their wipers set to automatic. First time they get in the car, thing goes to make a swipe on the windshield, and all of a sudden you hear pop, and one or both arms don't move anymore. Oh. So it's a weak link of the Tesla, you'd say. Right, exactly. Yeah, it's basically just a cast piece of aluminum, and it's not made to handle a large amount of snow, and especially if there's ice and other stuff holding them in place. Okay. So it's an expensive repair. You're talking about $350 for the transmission itself. Wow. And probably about an hour of labor. So you're over $500 for what is a completely avoidable thing to have to deal with. Gotcha. So if you have the winter package, use it. In the winter time, regen is low. Right.
You know, I'm assuming the car is having a difficult time feeding power back in the battery because it's still cold.
So if you don't preheat the car and you go out to drive on the road, right, and you're accustomed to a car that has regen all the time,
yeah, that's an
that
issue.
First time you go to stop is going to be a big surprise.
Yeah, yes, I've noticed that.
You know, and in some cases I've actually heard of people accidentally rear-ending somebody because of that.
I believe it. Yeah.
So you know, regen does make a huge difference in the way the car stops. So yeah, so you obviously want to pay attention to that and make sure that, you know, if the car isn't preheated, that you're aware of the fact that it's not going to stop that first few times.
Mm-hmm. You
know, usually it takes about 15-20 minutes when you're driving around. You'll actually see the dashed lines will kind of grow larger,
okay,
as the car warms up, and then you'll know, okay, well, I have more regen available to me. If it's a rear-wheel drive car,
mm-hmm,
you want to keep regen on low when it's poor driving conditions outside. Otherwise, when you're letting off and regen activates, you can actually cause the back of the car to fishtail a little bit.
Oh.
Just like a regular rear-wheel drive car would be. If
right,
you leave it in gear and you take your foot off the accelerator, it's going to kind of wiggle in the back and kind of be scary.
Right. Or fun, depending on who you are.
Right, exactly. And if you're in a parking lot with nobody else, or if you're on the highway with, you know, 100 people around you.
Right, yeah. It can be a problem. I can see that. I noticed that after I've been driving around for a while, especially in the wintertime or after like a rainstorm, when the car is parked for a while, I have a hard time getting it out of gear, like putting it into reverse to get out of my driveway. I hear a very loud clunk.
Right.
Like, what is that, the drive unit? What causes that clunking noise?
So basically that's usually either corrosion or rust that's built up either on the parking brake caliper,
okay,
or the regular brakes themselves. The best thing to do would be once a week or once every 2 weeks, turn regen to low, get up on the highway, you know, doing 65, 70 miles an hour, and do a couple of really forceful stops.
Okay.
And that'll help clean off most of what's on the rotors. It'll also help with any kind of like brake squeaks and those kind of noises, because rust does build up there because you're not using them as often.
Right.
The parking brakes themselves are usually what causes that clunk, and they're basically stuck on or stuck off. And for those, it's really, they have to be taken apart and cleaned up.
Okay.
It's usually rust that's built up, and there's not much you can do about that other than to clean them up yourself.
Okay. And how about snow tires? Is that a must?
If it's a rear-wheel drive Tesla, I would say definitely.
Okay.
If it's dual motor, you probably can get away with all seasons.
All right.
But again, it also depends on what condition those all seasons are in. So
gotcha,
if the tread's low, it's still not going to make a difference whether you have, you know, dual motor or not. If you can't get traction, you're not going anywhere.
Okay.
So it's definitely recommended no matter what. But I think if you've got, you know, like the Michelin Primacies that Tesla has, or a good all-season tire, so for dual motor cars, you'd be fine with those.
Okay, awesome. This is my wife's car, so, you know, it's her problem. I'll let her kind of figure that out on her own in terms of snow tires and stuff, but I'll have her try it out and see what happens.
Right.
Here's what I did after talking to Chris. I got snow tires installed and found out my tires were not inflated ideally. This could have a big effect on range as well. I also learned to make sure range mode is off when preheating the car. Range mode reduces the amount of power used by the heaters. This is best if you're headed out on a long trip and your car is cold. You can start heating your car, but if range mode is on, the car won't be as warm as you expect it to be. However, my problem is that I only charged 110 volts, as I said in the video. So even though my car is plugged in, it's still losing range as it's preheating. So that's on me to install an actual 220 volt outlet in the garage. With the tips that Chris gave me, things definitely got better, but I still haven't got used to the idea of using the seat heaters primarily and keeping the heat low. Because my kids sit in the third row, I have to keep the heat going because it takes a very long time for the third row to get and stay warm on a Model S. So that's been a big downside for me. But either way, it's all good. I hope you enjoyed the video about my rear-wheel drive Tesla in the winter. If you have any other questions, throw them in the comment section. I hope this video was helpful for you because I hated making it. So stay tuned because the next episode, I'll go back to being the old Rich. See you guys soon.